So I'm going to show you how I would approach an eye in watercolour. So I've drawn a simple shape of an eye. I'm just going to pop on a little bit of water into the colour of the iris. Now I've got two little highlights that I don't want to put water on, so I'm just going to avoid those. Just make sure I've got a nice even coat of water on the iris. I'm going to come in with some blue, cobalt blue. So it's going to flow nicely into the paint, into the water. I'm going to be careful around those little tiny highlights. You want to keep them as small as possible. Rinse my brush out. I'm going to pop in a little bit of green gold. Now it all depends on what colour eye you've got. If you've got an eye that's more hazel, you probably use a bit more burnt sienna with that cobalt blue. You've just got to watch the consistency of how much water you've got in there. The trick is to not move too soon. If I take a tiny little bit of cobalt blue onto each corner of the eye, then with a wet brush I'm just going to soften that in. I'm trying not to touch this middle bit of the eye because that's still wet, and I'm waiting for that to go off a little bit before I do the next phase. You can also take a little bit of your dark colour. So I have got a mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna. So that makes a fantastic dark brown, and it also makes a fantastic black if you put more ultramarine blue in there. So I'm just blending that in a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is get some of this black colour and come into the centre. And I want it to run a little bit. So this is why I've waited for the paint to slightly dry, because I don't want it to run too much. But the beauty of watercolour is you can get a really nice soft effect. So I'm still using a number 6 round, but now I'm going to swap down to a number 2. And I'm going to come round the edge of the eye. And along the top. Okay, so what I want to do now is with a clean damp brush, just soften this edge in here. I don't want it to be too sharp, and you can lift out a little bit of light. So you've got this nice soft flow here. I'm going to just with a damp brush just touch the top of the eye here again, so it's not too harsh. This is, you just basically want a really nice soft effect. If any of this has run too far, clean, nearly dry brush, just take some of it back. You still want to see the white of the eye, but not too much. You could pop a tiny bit of something rosy in there if you wanted to show the tear duct a little bit more. Okay, I'm just going to soften that bit in there because that's gone over the edge to where I want it to be. So that's just a damp brush, soften that in. I'm going to dry this off and then I'm going to put the detail in the pupil. So that's nice and dry now. And what we can do is come in with some of the black to sharpen up the pupil. So use whichever brush you are comfortable with. So I'm using a round number 6, I'm quite comfortable with that. But you could use a round number 2. It's just about getting a nice edge and just not losing those little highlights you've created, and also not losing the softness. You don't want to lose that beautiful softness that you've gained with the softening of that first layer. What I'm also going to do is pick up a little bit of cobalt blue and just bring that in areas where it's going to be a bit darker. So it's always lighter at the bottom of the eye. You get a highlight where it's hitting the eye, and then where the light comes through the eye it's always lighter. So I want you to leave a light area, not fill them all in. You can also pop a little bit more cobalt blue in there. The whites of the eyes are never as white as you think. Be shadowed in. Then if I take a little bit more of a brown mix, just bring in some eyelashes. Now I tend to not do too much detail, I tend to keep it quite loose. So I popped in that brown and I would just soften that in as an indication. So I'm wet brush, I'm touching the paper, I'm touching the paint, but I'm not really moving the paint, I'm just letting it flow. Into that wet area. If you can get to the point where you're just slightly touching the paint and you see I've come this way rather than this way, it's much easier. The tip of the brush needs to touch the paint. Okay, hope you've enjoyed it.